Cup is a stingy competition. In its 92-year history, there have only ever been 8 winners. Of those winners, it's all the usual suspects: Brazil, Argentina, France, Germany. So I'm sure no one will be surprised that most teams don't even tend to make it as far as the finals. Similar to how the rich stay rich, winning footballing nations often tend to remain as winning footballing nations. Which is why one particular story from the 2018 World Cup stands out pretty clearly amongst the many footballing stories in recent international football history. A team that only came into existence in the early 90s found themselves in the final on the world's biggest stage. A team that everyone knew was good, sure, but also a team that certainly wasn't amongst the main favorites to go all the way. Yet they came pretty close to going all the way. Croatia. The Vatreni's World Cup campaign in 2018 was a thing of beauty. It's also a campaign that I think is severely underrated. And I say that especially considering the fact that not so alleged corruption, deceit, and shady dealings were surrounding the Croatian FA and Croatian football in general while all of this was happening. And because of all of that, I thought there is no better time than the present to revisit the tale, the lead up, the event itself, as well as the aftermath. So, with that being said, how did Croatia almost break football? Yo, what's going on everyone? Hope you're doing well. I'm Tinashe, welcome back to the channel. Now, I do mean everything that I said in the intro, but at the same time, I was being deliberately misleading. To say that Croatia's national team was only formed in the early 90s is a factual statement. However, it also undermines the deep, rich footballing history from which Croatia was born. And because of that, like many stories involving the Balkans, we start with Yugoslavia. Croatian-born footballers have been active in the footballing scene for just about as long as anybody. Only difference between them and many is that they were playing under the Yugoslavia umbrella for a very, very long time. And they did so alongside players born in what we now know as Slovenia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, aka Italy's worst nightmare, and Serbia. As these are all historically nations that enjoy a bit of football, the Yugoslavian teams that took to the pitch in official matches were often quite dangerous. 2 semi-final appearances in World Cups, 2 runners-up medals in European Championships. And just a note on that last one, a lot of people have claimed in the past that they should have at least 1 European Championship to their name. Apart from second place finishes in 1960 and 1968, they had an incredible squad in 1992. However, that squad was banned from participating after initially qualifying for the 92 Euros. And Denmark, who had failed to qualify originally, finishing second to Yugoslavia in the qualifying groups, took their place and won the whole thing. But of course the reason they were banned was no laughing matter in the slightest. An outbreak of civil war led to sanctions from the UN. UEFA followed suit and barred Yugoslavia from competing in the tournament days before it began. In the midst of the Yugoslav wars, the breakup of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia naturally also resulted in the breaking off of Yugoslav players into their respective countries. And while all these nations as a collective have produced some of the finest footballers out there to this very day, none have done so quite like Croatia. No other nation amongst those that broke off has appeared at as many World Cups or Euros as Croatia. By quite a bit too. Upon admission into FIFA, Croatia were placed in 125th place. That's where they sat in early 1994. By the end of that year, they sat in 62nd. I'd imagine that it was pretty common knowledge to those that followed football even in the day of Yugoslavia that Croatia felt like a footballing force. In their first Euros after independence, they made it to the quarterfinals, but it wasn't until 1998 that this feeling became official, the 1998 World Cup. Mind you, this was Croatia's first ever World Cup as a fully fledged member of FIFA. Armed to the teeth with the likes of Davor Šuker, Igor Stimac, Zvonimir Boban, and Robert Prosinecki, this team had a fantastic tournament, which probably shouldn't be all that surprising, as all the players I just mentioned won the FIFA Under-20 World Cup with Yugoslavia in 1987, which is also one of the main reasons why a lot of people believe that Yugoslavia would have been favorites to win the Euros in '92. But I digress. Croatia finished in 3rd in 1998 as they were bested by the host nation and the team that would go on to win in the semifinals, France. Šuker won the Golden Ball with 6 goals in 7 games, and shortly after that, a team that was ranked 125th 4 years prior was now in 3rd in the world rankings. And before we go any further, I just want to take a moment to note that there is definitely something to be said about the mentality of these players. All of them were likely affected by the wars going on in their country to some extent, whether it be losing family members, fleeing the country, or even just knowing someone that was affected. The mental fortitude required to deal with this and perform under pressure can't be overlooked. And the exact same thing can be said about the players that occupy the national team as well as the local leagues to this very day. Anyway, all of this is just to say that Croatia had arrived and were not to be taken lightly. Although Croatian football was on an upward trajectory almost immediately following their independence, they failed to progress in the way that many thought they would. Miroslav Blažević was appointed as the national team coach in 1994 and oversaw the revamp of his national side. By 2000, Croatia's squad of gems had begun to show their age. Failure to qualify for the 2000 Euros and a poor start to the 2002 World Cup qualifiers saw Blažević decide that it was time to dip. And his next few successes didn't fare all too well either. None of them lasted for more than 2 years. Mirko Josic, Otto Baric, and Zlatko Kranjčar. Those who follow the EPL may have had their ears ring when I said that last one. Indeed, Zlatko Kranjčar was the father of Harry Redknapp's favorite player, Niko Kranjčar. So I'm guessing you can all put 2 and 2 together and have already assumed that Harry Redknapp wasn't the only one that was accused of favoritism involving Niko. And on the topic, Niko Kranjčar is actually quite an interesting figure, divisive in Croatia at the time, for sure. A product of Dinamo Zagreb's academy that captained the senior team at one point at only 17 years of age. He then moved to fierce rivals Hajduk Split after falling out with Zagreb's upper management, which did not go well with the Zagreb Ultras. Obviously very talented, but accused of only being selected for Croatia at several points because of his father. Curious case. Anyway, from one former hammer to another, Kranjčar was sacked and Slaven Bilic took control of Croatia in 2006 after a disappointing World Cup that ended in a group stage exit. Bilic provided a bit more of what was expected of a Croat coach, and certainly more of what was desperately needed: positivity. He managed the team over a 6-year period and even saw them make the quarterfinals of the 2008 Euros. They topped a tricky group involving eventual finalists Germany, Poland, and Austria, before unfortunately being knocked out by Turkey on penalties. He may have failed to qualify for the 2010 World Cup and had got knocked out at the group stages in the 2012 Euros, but there was a newfound hope bubbling up around the support. Fans were now more optimistic about the future of the national team, and Bilic was credited as one of the major reasons for this. Of course, he was nowhere near the only reason. As you would expect from this country, a new crop of players had begun to make lots of noise across the globe. But even though a light was shining on this national team, the shadows had never truly left. Shady dealings that had been going on for years were about to be aired out for all to witness. Bilic stepped down in 2012 to move on to Lokomotiv Moscow, and thus another round of manager roulette began. This time, it lasted 5 years. In any case, while all this was happening, all across Europe, Croatian superstars were absolutely lighting things up on the domestic scene. Shotstopper Daniel Subasic with Monaco, a man who was a key part of Monaco's incredible 2017 Liga and win. Mario Mandzukic, a fierce number 9 that had been around for a while, but had been elevated to the elite after moving to Germany with Bayern Munich. Ivan Perisic, one of the fittest wingers you'll ever see with the ability to match. Ivan Rakitic, a starter in Barcelona's midfield over a 6-year period, which tells you all you really need to know. Mateo Kovacic, crazy to think that this guy is still only 28, one of the sleekest attack-minded midfielders on the planet. Dejan Lovren, a strong centre-back, prone to mistakes here and there with Liverpool, but still a solid player. There were of course more notable players in the fold, but the crown jewel amongst them all was and continues to be Luka Modric. The man, once dubbed as a La Liga flop after his transfer from Spurs, has since become the best central midfielder in the world over the last 10 years, perhaps even further beyond that. A tireless runner, a flashy dribbler when he chooses to be, and an overall phenom of a player. Croatia were looking dangerous, a new generation, as gold as ever. Performances with the national team were improving, likely as a result of the increase in quality of players. But they weren't there just yet. The 2014 World Cup, the 2016 Euros, some good performances, particularly in the group stages of the 2016 Euros. If these guys wanted to achieve something with this crop, all roads pointed towards the 2018 World Cup. Now, to be clear, they weren't favorites to win the tournament. In fact, they finished second in their qualifying group and they sat in 10th place on the list of favorites. They had odds of 33-1. All the same, things were looking good for these players to give it a go and show what they were made of, which is true to an extent, but things are never quite that simple. This country was going through a glorious transformative phase of producing incredible talent. So, for anyone that understands how the world works, it won't come as a surprise that there were people behind the scenes that were working to capitalize on that for their own personal gain. The most prominent of those people is a man by the name of Zdravko Mamić. In the mid-2010s, Mamić was the vice president of the Croatian FA and an executive director at Dinamo Zagreb. He had held top positions at the club for quite some time, and he's also quite the personality, it seems, routinely yelling at reporters in the press and causing a scene whenever a camera is around. Because of the deep connections he had amongst those in power in the Croatian FA, cultivated over a near 40-year period, many refer to him as the most powerful figure in Croatian football. And what did he do with that power? Well, amongst other allegations, taking a 50% cut of the earnings and transfer fees of Zagreb players, bribery, fraud, as well as tax evasion. The 50% sharing deals were seemingly common practice for Mamić. Young players from impoverished backgrounds would get a large upfront sum which would be life-changing for them, and in return, they would give him 50% of what they earned in perpetuity. Each deal was apparently unique to one another, so it'll be hard to go into details, but what's important to note here is that these deals were predatory. Some might also add illegal. And the players involved? Well, amongst many others, Luka Modric and Dejan Lovren. In addition to that, Mamić and his cohorts, quite notably including his brother, the manager of Zagreb over several tenures, are accused of leeching tens of millions of euros from Zagreb in player transfers as well as millions more in unpaid taxes. They've both been found guilty of various charges, and as of 2022, the Mamić brothers are both wanted fugitives in Croatia and have been residing in Bosnia as they hold dual citizenship. Why Bosnia? No extradition. Relating to the same story, Modric didn't come out of this as the victim that you may think he did. When questioned in 2017 over the legitimacy of the contracts he had with Zdravko Mamić, he first claimed that they had been agreed upon after his big money transfer to Spurs, a testimony that would prove some of Mamic's wrongdoings. However, later in 2018, he claimed that he misspoke or he was misheard or something, and that all his contracts with Mamić had been signed and agreed upon back when he signed his first professional contract with Zagreb. He was charged with a little something that is referred to as perjury. Zagreb ultras and the Croatian supporters were not happy with this contradictory showing from Modric at all. The chaos surrounding Mamić and the entire Croatian FA for that matter had been known for years. I mean, not a chance he was the only one benefiting from these deals, right? Fans were not afraid to let their frustrations be known. Flares had been thrown on the pitch during national team matches in attempts to get FIFA and UEFA to punish the FA. Swastikas had been burnt into the field, fans had invaded the pitch, it was all wild. Life is about timing, and in this scenario, the timing definitely could have been better. The Mamić brothers were found guilty, charged, and fled the country 1 week before the 2018 World Cup began. And perjury is an extremely serious charge. Going into the World Cup, there was a very real possibility that Croatia's talisman and captain could be thrown behind bars when he got back home. Dejan Lovren hadn't been charged yet, but he was also under investigation. And apart from these two big names, a whole lot of Croatian players from the national team had some sort of affiliation with Zagreb and or Mamić. So I can only imagine that there was a lot of fear, confusion, and everything in between circulating around the Croatian national team at the time. Crazy times indeed. Zlatko Dalic took over as head coach in 2017, and with him came stability in the midst of chaos. At the time of making this video, the man remains in office. At this point of the video, we've now come to the 2018 World Cup. But before we get into the tournament itself, I think we should take a look at how Dalic set his guys up, as well as some key figures. In this tournament, Croatia had been playing in either a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1, occasionally a 4-1-4-1. They actually switched things around quite frequently as every team needed their own strategy. For me, the most interesting and formidable aspect of this 2018 side, like most great teams, was their midfield. Ivan Rakitic, Luka Modric, and Marcelo Brozovic. The team played their best football with these three on the pitch, I think. Brozovic was the furthest back, screening the defense. Modric pushed forward the furthest and used his incredible mobility to show up wherever required. Rakitic hovered in the central areas, just in front of Brozovic and behind Modric. The three linked the play wonderfully and dictated the pace of the games throughout the tournament. The likes of Mateo Kovacic were also available to bolster the midfield, and the brilliance of these midfield options was that everyone offered something different. The beneficiaries of this midfield in attack were typically Ante Rebic, Ivan Perjury, Perisic and Mario Mandzukic, likely one of the largest front threes around. When getting in behind, the pace of Rebic was always a massive problem for the opposition. The movement of Perisic between the defenders was not ideal, and the strength, positioning, and determination of Mandzukic was every defender's worst nightmare. The three combined for 7 goals and 2 assists this time around. Andrej Kramaric and Moko Pšaka also provided depth in attack, both very direct players, great to have. At the back, the fullbacks of Šime Vrsaljko and Ivan Strinic were excellent at providing support to their fellow players. Vrsaljko was a bit more of an attack-minded fullback and would play high and overlap frequently. Strinic would typically hang back a bit more. Both fulfilled their defensive and support duties well, for the most part. Dejan Lovren and Domagoj Vida were the most typical centre-back pairing, and Monaco's Daniel Subasic rounded up the 11 at the back. This squad was a special one. With an average age of about 28, they were one of the hardest running teams of the tournament. Ivan Perisic, Ivan Rakitic, and Luka Modric topped the list for covered ground in this edition, with each running just over 72 kilometers over the tournament. Ante Rebic, along with Cristiano Ronaldo, clocked in the highest top speed of the tournament, achieving 34 kilometers per hour each. All of these stat lines are impressive, or the same, as they suggest. This was not an easy ride for the Croatians. They had to dig very deep multiple times throughout this tournament. To be fair, the group stages weren't all that much of an issue for them. 3 straight wins, comfortable wins too. The knockouts is where all the problems stem from. Croatia went to extra time in 3 out of the 4 knockout games that they played, meaning that they essentially played the equivalent of an extra game. I guess it's no surprise that Croatian players topped the running list. Adding on to that, probably the main reason that they went to extra time in all of these matches was because they conceded first and were chasing the game in all of these matches. First came Denmark in the round of 16, where they conceded in the opening minute. They then equalized in the 4th minute, setting up a tasty showdown. The game ended 1-1 after 120 minutes. But Croatia won on penalties, so I doubt any Croatians were complaining. They might have been complaining when Modric missed a penalty in extra time though, but that's water under the bridge. Next up was the hosts and effectively the entire stadium they played in, Russia. Denis Cheryshev opened the scoring with an unbelievable strike, but Kramaric drew them level 6 minutes later. A goal apiece from each side in extra time took Croatia to penalties yet again, and once more they were victorious. The 3 Lions stepped up in the semi-finals, and again, an early goal was scored, a fantastic Trippier free kick. But Perisic and Mandzukic said, "Not today," to the threat of elimination. The game still required 120 minutes, but no penalties, at the very least. And just like that, Croatia were in their first World Cup final ever. Only problem was that France were the last hurdle, a team of absolute monsters in blue. Despite this, Croatia had the better of the French early in the game. The midfield was just that little bit sharper and looked the more likely to cause damage. However, like clockwork, Les Bleus took the lead, a Mandzukic own goal of all things. However, the script didn't vary all too much in the early stages of this one, as Croatia drew level 10 minutes later. Unfortunately, that is where the familiarities ended. A pen awarded by VAR was slotted by Griezmann, and France put 2 more in Croatia's goal with only 1 in reply. 4 goals to 2. France elated, Croatia devastated. For Croatia, the result of this World Cup final was devastating, especially considering how strong of a start they made to this game. All the same, the fact that they even got as far as they did was a shock to many people. And then we also have the controversies that were surrounding their camp too. Luka Modric, who was at the center of the scandals in the media, was rightfully named as the player of the tournament and received the prestigious Golden Ball. His efforts with Real Madrid, combined with his performances with his country, saw him go on to make history by scooping up every individual award on offer at the highest level in 2018. The Ballon d'Or, the UEFA Men's Player of the Year, the FIFA Best Player of the Year, all while being the first Croatian to ever win all of the above. He also broke the 10-year cycle of Messi and Ronaldo Ballon d'Or wins, which many found issues with, but this video isn't about that. Modric had a fantastic year, and to make it even better for him, he was cleared of all charges in the months that followed the World Cup. Another scandal. Perhaps. But taking things back to Croatia, their journey to the World Cup final and the incredible progression of the nation since achieving independence is admirable. A testament to their footballing prowess is that they've been able to produce 2 exceptional generations of players in only 20 years. That's 2 more than the vast majority of countries have done in their entire existence. Albeit on their last legs, many of those players from the 2018 World Cup are still around. But more importantly, there are some very promising young players coming through the ranks. At just 20 years of age, Joško Vardiol is the first name that comes to mind. All of this is just to say that this is a nation that we can expect to stay right up there with the elite for years and years to come. And there we have it. Let me know all your thoughts on Croatia in the comments below. Feel free to follow all the socials. That's all from me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.